Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about value-based case recording. I was recently speaking about this in Exeter for Devon County Council, just following on from Nick Barwick.
Yeah, and so we're at Devon County Council speaking at their 7 Pillars event and just doing some fantastic things. The audience seems to be really engaged and getting involved, which is absolutely fantastic. And Kayleigh's going to smash it a little bit later as well.
Yeah, so I've got my bit coming up. So speaking to a room full of children's social workers, but I very much feel like it all aligns, like value-based practice, and you know, I'm really glad that you did the starting point of like getting it right and the sort of language and sticky labels and talking about the impact of labels, and we're really going to unpick that. So talking after Nick was a little bit daunting too, because he was absolutely amazing, but he's been a public speaker since the age of 19 and he blew me away. So if you ever get the pleasure of listening to him speak, it's well worth it. So anyway, moving on, I think what was fundamental to my talk and building from Nick, so Nick was sharing about sort of his lived experience, and that was really impactful, thinking about use of language and how it can be used for a tool to inspire or to really break someone down. And we've placed a lot of onus on the impact of stereotypical language and judgmental labeling, and how that can impact on people as individuals, but also outcomes for people as well. So I think going back to my previous video around core social work values, they are respect, acceptance, honesty, truth and trust. Jerry Skelton came up with those, and I think respect is around people having intrinsic worth on the basis of being a human being. So this is key to social work, because sometimes it's hard to respect people that we don't agree with, and I think that's where the distinction comes, because it's not, we respect people on the basis of being human and having worth, and we can respect that they're worth something even if we don't agree with their actions. What they've done is their behaviour, or how they're acting is their behaviours. We can condemn someone's behaviour, or we can say that a certain behaviour is unacceptable, which sometimes we have to. So say a child is being neglected, or an older person is not being cared for properly, like we can't just say that that's okay, and we'd have to record that accurately in our case notes and assessments. But we also need to be careful about how we're recording those things. We need to avoid character-based statements. So this is something I actually used in my talk. Language which condemns a person. She's just controlling. Another way of saying that is describing exactly what you observed as a practitioner. So describing the behaviour. During the home visit, Sarah repeatedly spoke over the practitioner and attempted to steer away the conversation from discussing Zara's medical appointments. So that's just a neutral way of saying, right, this is exactly what I saw. And if you were thinking about that in relation to a child, Nick mentioned something around a recording which would have been inappropriate, where a child was seen to be assaulting a social worker. There's so many reasons why that is not the way that you'd write it, because the tone just isn't right. It's like a criminal intent to it, a criminal connotations to it, which you have to be careful when you're saying that, unless it's something that's actually gone through as a criminal act and been seen that way. The best thing you can do is just say what actually happened. So, you know, did the child reach out a hand to hit you or something like that? Just write exactly what it was. And it's also, you have to be careful, because we have to show that we're being fair in our analysis of people, and you know, a child may not be at the developmental stage to know exactly what they're doing or why, or understand that. They're not trying to manipulate us, and have to be careful that we're not making it seem that way in what we're writing. In terms of where I've got it wrong, when I've not come across right in my records, I spoke about this, but it reminds me of where I'd done some really good value-based work with someone where she was a psychologist by background and she'd not really been engaging with the professionals, but from looking deeper, it was to do with the fact that she didn't feel valued by people, she didn't feel recognised. And everyone's seeking our approval, even if they don't show it. And that's not just about sort of like vanity or external validation. It's about people just feeling like they need to be accepted and recognised. And this lady was a really highly educated person, and she'd had a very interesting career. She felt like she was just being labelled like a bed blocker and things, and I recognised that and understood where she was coming from and like her identity. But when I wrote her assessment, I just followed through with the form, I rushed through it, and I wrote that she did not wish to engage in work or training. That wasn't accurate. She wanted to, she couldn't because of her disability. And now I really reflect, I'm careful with how I write things because it didn't align with my practice approach. And it really makes me think about something that I've been looking at a lot around system 1 and system 2 thinking that comes from, it's a theoretical thing, but I kind of link it to this whole, are we rushing around like a cheetah, or are we doing some intentional thinking like sloth moments in the day? So System 2 is about deliberate thinking. So something about this series, like it talks about, you know, when you're really thinking clearly because and reflective and having to think deeper, because if you imagine you're walking along and you can have a casual conversation quite fine, but if someone asks you a complex maths question, you probably have to stop walking, and that's when you're really engaging that system 2 and you're thinking deeper. And I do think that like a lot of the time in social work, like you are rushing around, you're using your system 1, you're like making snap judgments. But sometimes you have to like take a step back and really think carefully about what you're writing, the decisions you're making, like what you're actually thinking about. And I think we're living in an age where there's so much technology, like there's a speed culture, we're having to make snap judgments, we're having to work quickly, seem productive, but actually there is a skill for slowing down and knowing when you need to do that and when you need to actually engage your brain. And for me, I learned a lot from how I'd written and how I'd got it wrong. And I think carefully about like, would I be comfortable if someone read this about them? And I think about themselves. And I think that can be hard, and because we are writing about things that are very awkward at times, and we can't be so scared of political correctness that we say nothing at all, and our values and our records are just so vague. I saw a brilliant example of this on the Social Care Institute for Excellence website around a practitioner had written that someone was leaving unwanted gifts on the doorstep of various people. But a subsequent record stated that in fact they were dead animals, and the original work had not really like explained it that explicitly. And when that information was there explicit about the dead animals, it was like, oh, it highlighted more the gravity of the situation and that it needed to be taken seriously, because you have to think about the safety of the actual worker going to that visits, and also the pattern of behaviour and the implications of that. And I think it's the same, you know, if you're seeing an environment that's you know, we walk into some houses and it can be difficult to describe because you don't want to be offensive, like if there's lots of rubbish around, or like it's very cluttered and you're trying to think like, what's the professional way of describing this? And the important thing to note is that actually there's so many reasons why someone may be struggling with their home environment. If someone's living in poverty, they're probably just trying to survive, and it's understandable that things can get out of hand. And sometimes if people come into my house and they made a snap judgment, they may think it was inappropriate and that a mess, but all of that comes down to value judgments, doesn't it? And I think something useful around that is from research and practice speak about it. About the social graces and like how coming from different angles and your aspects of our identity can impact on how we view a situation. So I'd recommend you have a look at that. But we all have to be very reflective of the fact that we bring bias into everything that we see and how we make judgments. And it's normal to make judgments. We have to make judgments, but it's about reflecting on what we're seeing and also being aware of the wider systemic structural factors impacting people. So people do not make choices in a vacuum. Everyone's behaviour and the choices are impacted by wider factors like are their social networks under strain, that people may have had loads of support and then suddenly that's just disappeared? Are they experiencing grief, loss? Is it a temporary situation? And all of those things come into it. So the best thing we can do is just describe the context, not use labels, because labels are the things that stick and they can be really impactful and they can write people off, and it's so unfair. And if you've ever been labelled yourself, I've sometimes been labelled as having a bad memory, and that stuck with me and made me think that I couldn't achieve academically, and I since have, but it took me a long time to shed that view of myself. And I think it's really important that we get it right for people that we're supporting.